Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Kaczynski, and I'd like to welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I'd like to welcome everybody today, but I'd like to give a special welcome to any guests that we have today. Thank you for taking a chance on walking through our doors. We are a liberal faith community that intentionally welcomes all. We do this without requiring adherence to any religious belief or creed. We try to foster a climate of purposeful inclusion, an environment where all can feel safe, valued, cared for, and given an opportunity to form meaningful connections with each other. We cherish the diversity of humanity, a diversity which includes differences in sex, age, race, ethnicity, national origin, range of abilities, sexual orientation, gender identity, financial means, education, etc., etc., etc. So whether it's your first time here or your 100th, we hope you know that we cherish you for just exactly who you are. Are there any announcements?
A little race. I'm Mary. I'm the worship committee chair. And next week, just want to know, and let everybody know, next week is our water communion. For those of you who have only been with us a short time, it's when we bring some water, hopefully that we collected where we were over vacation, and then we put it in a communal bowl and mix it with the water that we have left from past years. And it's basically the grown-up version of how I spent my summer vacation. But just talk a little bit about what the water means to you, where you went, and it's intergenerational, so we want to have the kids put their water in as well. We will have a picture of representative water in case you forget yours.
Good morning, I'm Clifford, and in 3 weeks I'm going to be doing another cooking demo. And this time it'll be on cream puffs. I'll be doing desserts finally, and I'll be making the cream puffs, the pastry cream custard, as well as demoing how to take that same cream puff dough, mix some cheese to it, and make wonderful little yummy cheese puffs that you can serve as hors d'oeuvre. And all proceeds go to the church.
I'm so excited for that demonstration. Hi, I'm Emily. I just wanted to let everyone know that I'm taking the Cradles to Crayons donations down next week on Tuesday. So if anybody forgot their donations last week or this week, you still have time. I know I forgot mine last week and I'm the one taking stuff down. So there we go. So next week is your cutoff. Thanks.
Okay, so now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our speaker today. Many of us know J.D. Stillwater, but just for those of you who don't, he is a science ambassador. Is that because you taught science for 24 years to middle schoolers?
Something like it.
Okay. And he's an author who writes and speaks about profound insights from natural reality, insights that drive paradigm shifts and cultural awakening. This work springs from J.D.'s love of science and his gift of making difficult concepts graspable for non-scientists. J.D. is an officer of the Religious Naturalist Association, a global community of people who take nature to heart, and serves on the governing council of the Institute on Religion in an Age of Science. J.D. is married since 1987 with 2 grown children. So what's very interesting, I'm going to add this because if you've ever gone to his website, and I would encourage you all to, is I always am interested in mission statements. JD's mission is to share revelations and insights from science with as broad an audience as possible, nudging global culture toward a new level of thinking that's aligned with how reality works, more sustainable, connective, inclusive, humble, graceful, and integral. So with that, JD.
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Our opening words this morning come from Marnie Harmony. There's a tongue twister. This is adapted from her original. She writes, We whose journeys are always beginning. We whose mission always awaits us. We whose visions are bent on loving. We gather together here. We gather as a community drawn together out of common need, each toting our own carpetbag of treasures and dreams. We gather together with questions, the kinds of questions that provoke us to the path of action. We gather with hope, the kind of hope that pulses on through uncertainty. We gather wanting certainty and having none. But we are wakeful to possibilities as we seek discernment and gentle judgment. We gather then unbounded but close. We gather thirsting. We gather drawn to our source, our Creator. And we light the chalice this morning. Is there someone? Oh, good. We light the chalice this morning, which is our symbol of our search for truth and meaning, our hearts brimming with wonder, welcoming all the questions that search engenders, especially those whose answers are unsettling, always urging us onward into yet more awe, more humility, more gratitude. Nicely done. Will you rise in body or spirit and join in singing Open My Heart from number 1013 in your tier hymnal? And we are not going to attempt this as a round this morning. But if you do it in a renegade fashion, it'll sound good probably. Will the young and the young at heart come down and grab some mats, and we'll do a story for all ages. Yeah. You can be young at heart too. I see you out there. Right, yeah, we're gonna sit right here. Once upon a time. Oh, come on, come on. Plenty of room. Let's find a spot. Once upon a time, that's how all the best stories start, right? Well, this is a story about someone I actually know. He's a grown-up now. Once upon a time, there was a boy who really struggled to learn how to read. Luckily, he was homeschooled and his parents sort of let him learn at his own pace. But he got to be pretty old and was still struggling. But after a while, he started to be able to read a few words. And the reason it was hard for him is because when he looked at something that was written, like if he looked at a book, the letters seemed to move around on their own. They didn't stay where they belonged when he was looking at them. But he did slowly start to be able to do some things. And for too long, he was reading fairly long books, like chapter books. But when anyone asked him, and I asked him, do you know how to read yet? He would always say, no, I don't know how to read. And then he was reading even longer books, like the kind of books with no pictures in them. But still, if people asked him, do you know how to read? Or how's your reading coming along? He would say, no, I don't know how to read. And then he was reading books that were made for adults about how to build things, like how to build houses and how to wire electrical outlets and that sort of thing. But still, when I asked him, he would say, no, I don't know how to read. And I found out years later from his mother that the reason he would say no, he didn't know how to read, is because he thought that knowing how to read meant that you knew every single word in the dictionary. And he didn't know every single word yet, so he thought he didn't know how to read, even though he was reading whole books and things. So there are some questions that seem really simple and easy to answer, like, do you know how to read? But that question isn't really a yes or no question, is it? It's not like one day you don't know how to read and you wake up the next morning and you know how to read, right? Isn't it true that you kind of learn a little bit at a time and you get better at it a little bit at a time? And I think there are lots of questions in life that are like that. They seem really simple and easy to answer, but they're not. They're actually not. And when you really think about them, you start to realize that maybe there isn't a good answer, or that the answer is much more involved than yes or no. Can you think of any questions like that? Well, I have a little demonstration of one. Hold on, let me get my phone. Someone said, what color is this?
White.
It's more than one color, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know if the old at heart who didn't come join us can see this. Yeah.
It's also sort of gray. It's surrounded by gray.
Yes. So it seems like a simple question. What color is this? And especially if somebody said, is this black or is it white? Well, that's a silly question. It's both, right? It's sort of both and sort of neither. Yeah. So I encourage all of us to watch for questions like that. When people try to force us to answer a simple question that really isn't that simple, it's a good idea to pay attention and think about, maybe this isn't the right question, instead of trying to find an answer that doesn't really work. Thank you for joining us this morning. And I think now we should sing them out.
So now it's time for our offertory. Giving is not just about making a donation, it's about making a difference. Our UUFD ancestors are the ones who physically obtained this land, built our buildings, raised the money to create this space. They are also the ones who made sure there was a safe and welcoming community. They're the ones who made this community of support, challenge, and love. So let us honor our ancestors by keeping their spirit and our community alive. So please donate what you can. All is appreciated.
start with a brief reading, and this was written by Sir Roger Scruton, and it's from his book, Effing the Ineffable, which I love that title. He writes, "There is nothing wrong with referring to the ineffable. The mistake is to describe it. Something can be meaningful even though its meaning eludes all attempts to put it into words. Anybody who goes through life with open mind and open heart will encounter these moments of revelation, moments that are saturated with meaning, but whose meaning cannot be put into words. These moments are precious to us. When they occur, it is as though on the winding, ill-lit stairway of our life, we suddenly come across a window through which we catch sight of another and brighter world, a world to which we belong, but which we cannot enter." I've been wrestling with several years with a simple question, and it really is simple, and it's one most of you have probably wrestled with too. And that question, and my asking it, is kind of central to my work in science and spirituality, and yet I've often been stymied by it. And the question is, what are my religious beliefs? Well, my religious communities are several, and I like it that way. Each one provides a different something to my experience of life, but all of them are big tent communities and don't really answer the question. Like being a UU, for example, gives me a place in a community of religious oddballs, but we're all odd in different ways, right? So when somebody asks me that dreadful question, do you believe in God or not? It simply doesn't work to answer, I'm a UU, right? It's a non sequitur, it's a dodge. I might as well say, I'm a plumber, right? I'd like to have a word or a phrase that means what I mean. What do I mean? For me, it hinges on ambiguity. So quite a few years ago now, my friend Linda wrote to me and she was asking for help. She's not one of these Lindas. She was asking for help, and this Linda is not any kind of wacko. She's not especially gullible or flaky. So I was fascinated by her description of what happened. And this is a long quote, so it's all her until I say end quote. She writes, "I wonder if you could help me understand from a more scientific view something that I experienced. I was walking the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and I was wondering if at the next town we might meet up with my grandson. As we were coming upon the town," this is an abandoned town high in the mountains and isolated. Now, this is going to sound strange, and I have never experienced anything like this. A shaft of energy came from above me and went through me. I hope you'll stay with me. It's hard to describe, but it was an energetic force, like a big shaft of light from the sky without the light. I could definitely feel it. It didn't hurt, and right afterwards, I thought my grandson was there, and he was. It was hugely tangible, this force. There was no denying it, and I was very aware. Have you ever heard of anything like this, or could explain what this could possibly be? I have had many spiritual explanations. It was so strange that I still wonder what it could be. Thanks for listening." End quote. Notice how tentative Linda is in describing this experience of hers. She's expecting me to laugh at her, being, science-oriented person. But she already had spiritual explanations, and apparently none of them were completely satisfying to her. Some of you may now be doing what people usually do, which is jumping to conclusions that fit their pre-existing worldviews. Some of you might be thinking she was hallucinating, maybe she was dehydrated or something. Some of you may be thinking it was a visit from angels, or it was a sign from God, or it was a portal to a higher dimension. Maybe it was a mild stroke or some other temporary neurological problem. Maybe she was having an LSD flashback, and so on, right? This is where our minds go. I say there's only one fully authentic answer that I could give to Linda. And here's what I wrote in reply, and this too is a pretty long quote. I said, Linda, direct experience is all we ever have to work with. Each of us has to make sense of the world as we experience it. And sometimes we try to fit the experience into a worldview that doesn't allow the experience to be as it was. Don't let anyone detract from or alter your memory of this. I have heard others speak of experiences like this, and my suggestion to myself as well is to just let it be, just as it was. Any explanation from anyone can only diminish it. I say take it on face value as a mysterious, uplifting experience that was real and needs no explanation. Instead of trying to force it into a label, focus on how it felt and what the experience means for you right now, today. I think that when we take the this is still a quote. I think that when we take the numinous and ineffable and try to use language to describe it, what was an expansive experience gets filtered through our culture's narrow filters, whatever culture we're from, and that process necessarily corrupts it. Try to remember it without words. Feel the sensations you felt then, and try to carry that wordlessness through the next few hours or days, and just see what happens. If you want my thoughts on what it really was, the only honest answer I could give her was, I don't know. I believe you that it happened, that it was real and tangible for you, and I believe it's important. I've just learned that too much thinking can ruin experiences like this. And that's the end of what I wrote back to her. Now, people who are familiar with my work know that science is bedrock for me. I try not to believe in stuff that there's no evidence for. Even then, when there's a lot of evidence for something, I try to take it on as a contingent belief, not a certainty. Stronger the evidence, the more confident I am. But I try to remember that new evidence could come along and shake everything up, right? So some people might say, but JD, that means you don't actually believe in anything. Well, if belief means unshakable faith, immune to new evidence, then yes, there is nothing I believe in. I think all knowledge is conditional. All certainties are chutzpah. To believe in something unshakably, completely untethered from experience or evidence is to disconnect yourself from reality, from evolution, from the flow of life. A conditional belief, which I think is more scientific, is kind of like a boxer's stance or a Tai Chi movement, always flexible and responsive, never trapped in any one narrow position. And that is the essence of science, of the scientific worldview. It's also pretty unusual for humans to actually live that way. I am still very much an apprentice of it. We humans really like to know, or at least to pretend that we know, right? As Linda mentioned in the introduction, another of my religious communities is the Religious Naturalist Association. And we define ourselves like this, quote, religious naturalists this is from the website, religious naturalists take nature to heart. We hold a naturalist view of how things are in the world, and we also see ourselves as religious in non-traditional ways, as we absorb the wonder of being alive and the order and beauty of the cosmos. We ask what is and what matters, seeking answers from natural rather than supernatural sources, end quote. In short, most religious naturalists are atheists, including me, sort of. In my discussions with other atheists, I am sometimes frustrated by what seems to me to be a dogmatic adherence to materialism that I think is a little too quick to dismiss personal experience that's ambiguous or hard to explain, like Linda's, like my own. I have long been personal friends with the grandson and the great-granddaughter of the famous psychic Edgar Cayce. I met Edgar Casey's son, Hugh Lynn Casey, when I was a young man working at a summer camp run by the Edgar Casey Foundation. The foundation was organized in 1931 to research and explore ideas like reincarnation, pyramids, the power of pyramids, astrology, Atlantis, dream interpretation, and a lot about diet and health. Now, if you're a science-minded skeptic like me, you may already be doing the eye roll and surreptitiously searching for the exits. I get it. Edgar Casey's psychic powers were thoroughly debunked when he was still alive in the 1920s. By debunked, I mean that skeptics demonstrated that a clever shyster with knowledge of stage magic and enough rudimentary medical vocabulary could do everything Casey did without any help from supernatural sources. If not for my personal knowledge of the Casey family, that'd be enough for me. I would conclude with the skeptics, nothing to see here, and move on. But I know those people well. They're not hoaxers. They're good, kind, honest, sincere people. So on the one hand, my science orientation puts me squarely in community with the skeptics who dismiss all of this as fraud at best and dangerous pseudoscience at worst. On the other hand, I know these people. They've dedicated their lives to sharing Casey's life and work, and they're certainly not getting rich from it. And to be clear, I do not expect anyone to believe in Atlantis or reincarnation based on my assertion that Casey's descendants are sincere people. I don't myself. So what do I believe? Did Edgar Casey tapped into some supernatural library of eternal truth? Or do I side with the skeptics, sure that it's all so much hokum and naivete? Though it may seem irrational and contradictory, I choose both and neither. I choose both, and neither. And here's why. I don't believe for a minute that every aspect of the natural world has been discovered by science, or even that all the relevant categories of force and energy have been discovered. Could there be some natural channel by which Edgar Casey could learn or know things he had no discernible way to know? My most thoughtful atheist friends would say, possibly, but my bet is on no. Of course, less thoughtful ones might say, Poppycock, even though, it's a yes-no question. My own answer is, I don't know. And beyond that, I know I don't know because I can't know. This is key to my message this morning. Less than 100 years ago, Werner Heisenberg showed us that because of an inherent ambiguity in the nature of subatomic particles, we can never know both their position and momentum with any precision. That's not quite right. It's not that we can never know both the momentum and position of a particle, it's that the particle doesn't have both a precise position and momentum. The two quantities end up being mutually exclusive when we're talking about subatomic particles. When the particle's speed is measured precisely, that's a measure of its momentum, its location in space smears out to fill the entire universe. When you nail it down to a precise location, its momentum becomes a superposition, a stack of an infinite set of values for its momentum. It becomes an infinite group of numbers rather than a single value. Confusing, right? This is quantum mechanics. And this bizarre bit of knowledge came about in response to the question, simple question, are subatomic particles objects or are they waves? Well, even though the two concepts are mutually exclusive, as in they can't possibly be both, they are indeed both, but they can only express qualities of one or the other at any given time. The position and momentum of quantum particles are known as complementary variables because you can know one or the other, but not both. You can treat objects, these tiny little objects, you can treat them as particles or waves, but not both. They are both somehow, but the two models, the two ways of describing them are incompatible. And that condition of incompatibility is called complementarity. And that term complementarity, I think, is relevant to my quest for a religious descriptor. The term was coined by Niels Bohr, the father of quantum physics. And complementarity is defined by its ambiguity and its paradox, by incompatible opposites that can both be simultaneously true. And this idea that two opposing, conflicting, mutually exclusive models can both be simultaneously true has some weird implications, obviously. For example, you may have heard of Schrödinger's cat. Schrödinger was a physicist who was trying to illustrate how ridiculous this probabilistic nature of quantum theory was, and his parody of it became an enduring scientific quandary. He described a sealed box, you've probably heard of this, in which a random quantum event, such as a uranium atom emitting radiation, a random event like that would trigger the poisoning of a cat. So after a while, for example, a half-life of uranium, during which the atom has a 50% chance of emitting some radiation, the cat inside the sealed box would be simultaneously alive and dead, because the atom both emits and doesn't emit the radiation until it's observed. It exists in a superposition of both states, emitted and not emitted, taking the cat along with it. Opening the box then to see what's going on in there triggers what's called quantum collapse, and the cat would, at that point only, instantly become either alive or dead. So until someone opens the box, the cat is thought to be simultaneously both alive and dead. This is quantum complementarity. And we Westerners tend to be either or people. All of our logical reasoning is founded on the notion that if A and B are incompatible, then either A is true or B is true or neither, right? If A is true, then B must be false. And all of that beautiful either or logic has served us very well, because it's brought us to discover that we actually live in a both and universe. The words wave and particle are either or names for both and phenomenon. Both and includes and surrounds either or. Both and includes and surrounds either or. Sort of like the word people includes and transcends the words friends and enemies, right? Those are opposites, but the word people includes all of it. So this is a both and universe that we live in, and it has some either or neighborhoods. It is uncomfortable not knowing what subatomic particles actually are, especially since our bodies are made out of these things, right? And physicists have been working on this for a century now. It's uncomfortable not knowing whether it's a cat or a corpse. We like certainty. That's why so many of us are so uncomfortable about androgyny and they, them, theirs as singular pronouns. We want to put our knowledge in boxes. We don't enjoy having to make whole new boxes like for the singular they, but we can do it. We can do it. Complementarity, though, is knowledge that will never fit in any imaginable box. Accepting that would require serious personal discipline, discipleship, contemplative practice. Complementarity evokes other concepts like paradox, crazy, strange, impossible, mystery. Well, it seems we may now have strayed into the territory of scientific mysticism, which is fine with me. In an interview with Krista Tippett on her On Being program, Nobel physicist Frank Wilczek said this about complementarity and the nature of quantum particles. He said, sometimes it's useful to think of it one way. Sometimes it's useful to think of it another way. And both can be informative in different circumstances. But it's very difficult, in fact, impossible, to apply both of them at once. He goes on, that's the essence of complementarity. You have to view the world in different ways to do it justice. And the different ways can each be very rich, can each be internally consistent, can each have its own language and rules, but they may be mutually incompatible. And to do full justice to reality, you have to take all of them into account. End quote. That sounds like Unitarian Universalism, doesn't it? Another Frank Schaeffer, in his book, Why I Am an Atheist Who Believes in God, writes, quote, with the acceptance of paradox came a new and blessed uncertainty that began to heal the mental illness called certainty, end quote. Now, it may be helpful to you to know that Frank Schaeffer is the son of famous Christian televangelists. He goes on, quote, these days I hold two ideas about God simultaneously. He, she, or it exists, and he, she, or it doesn't exist. I don't seesaw between these opposites, I embrace them, end quote. Sound familiar? In physics terms, Frank Schaeffer holds these two complementarities in superposition, like waves and particles, applying one or the other as needed to live a fruitful life, but not trying to force his reality into one box or the other. I aspire to the same. For a while, I called myself an agnostic. You know, agnostic literally means not knowing. And for me, that just felt a little too indecisive. I'm not agnostic about whether atoms or light are made of particles or waves. I know that they are paradoxically both, and neither. And that everything in my life and much of the universe is made of this same odd paradoxical stuff. Even here, I'm not talking about an unshakable certainty, but it's clear enough to base a worldview on. It's as certain as the round earth and the kinship of life. Let's call it quite certain. I'm quite certain. Similarly, I'm quite certain that there are fundamental aspects of nature yet to be revealed by scientific investigation. It is possible, though not likely, that some of those aspects may allow for phenomena we would regard as supernatural or paranormal today. But I am not agnostic because I do know. I know that I don't know, and that other people's experiences are different from mine. They're complex, they're ambiguous, hard to explain. Joseph Campbell says, quote, he who thinks he knows doesn't know. He who knows that he doesn't know, knows. So, you know, I'm happy to accept Joseph Campbell's seal of approval from my perspective. But like Schaeffer, I am an atheist who prays. I do not believe that an intervening supernatural deity is going to hear my prayer and violate the laws of nature to my benefit. I pray because I hear it, and it affirms my highest values within me. Does prayer work? Well, if you're praying for a new Mercedes-Benz, I'm quite certain it does not. Remember that old song, oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? But as a vehicle, for reaching into my own subconscious and steering myself towards my highest ideals, well, it works for me. God grant me the serenity to embrace the ambiguities I cannot resolve. So asking, so do you believe in God or not, is like asking what color that yin-yang symbol is. It's not actually a binary question, although it's often posed as one. Answering it honestly requires nuance, for me at least. But also, I think, even for the dogmatic extremes, which God are you asking about? With what attributes? I remember Bishop Spong famously saying, tell me about this God you don't believe in, because I probably don't believe in it either. I am a complementarist. Be careful, don't confuse me with complementarians. That term refers to religiously defined gender roles where men are the rightful heads of their households, because Bible. Well, I thought I had invented the term complementarism from complementarity, but in preparing this sermon, I Googled it just to see. And I found the following on a page at Rutgers. Quote, complementarism is the philosophical framework constructed on the basis of the postulate that the principle of complementarity formulated by Niels Bohr in quantum physics can be applied to biology, philosophy, and religion, end quote. That's the actual description of an actual course titled Complementarism, a science-based philosophical framework for integrating irreconcilable opposites. So I have a tribe. As the basis for a worldview, complementarity offers guidance for many social issues. I think if an electron can be both a particle and a wave, a child can be both male and female. An immigrant can be both an American citizen and speak their first language. A biracial child can be both white and black and not have to explain herself to anyone. Incidentally, the same goes for a presidential candidate. She can be both South Asian and black, right? And she can laugh authentically. We'll laugh with her. And I can be both an atheist and deeply religious. I think this approach offers a kind of deep humility that's sorely lacking in society and in geopolitics. I am a complementarist. My theology is embracing the paradox of irreconcilable opposites that are nevertheless both true, or at least both helpful. I am an atheist who prays, a New Age skeptic who is more interested in your experience than in my explanation of it. My God is nature's nuance, and my spiritual practice is to live fully embracing that, starting with my fellow perplexing humans. So go ahead, ask me if I believe in God. I'll probably remind you that creation itself is deeply ambiguous. I might say, tell me about the most puzzling and mysterious aspects of your beliefs. Where do they contradict themselves? How do they defy explanation? Because that is the happy crossroad where your path and mine could join. So be it. Amen. Our closing hymn is from the Gray hymnal. It's number 311, Let It Be a Dance. And if you will rise in body or spirit. Comedian Gilda Radner once said, quote, "I wanted a perfect ending. Now I've learned the hard way that some poems don't rhyme and some stories don't have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Life is about not knowing, having to change, taking the moment and making the best of it without knowing what's going to happen next. Delicious ambiguity." End quote. So as we part ways this morning, let us remember that we do not live in a black or white either or world. We live in a world overflowing with mystery, nuance, ambiguity, and ambiguity. I'm struggling with that word this morning. And also complementarity. If there are lessons to learn from the way the universe is constructed, one of them is that dogmatic binaries are usually wrong. Let us go and embrace it all.